So you're all very welcome to our webinar today. Today it's our Analytics in Action webinar series, and today we're going to be talking about analytics as a team sport and future-proofing your people strategy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Aoife Darcy. I'm the CEO of Krisolis, and at Krisolis we help companies embed analytics and AI practices into all of the decision-making processes. So just talk a little bit about the agenda today. So I'll be going through presentation for about 35 minutes. Throughout that, feel free to ask questions. Michelle is on hand in the background who can jump in and if you need can answer any of your questions. And then we'll have a formal Q&A for about 10 minutes at the end. So without any further ado, I will get going. So actually, in terms of answering questions, just to let you know a little bit about how Zoom works, you may or may not have used it before. In Zoom webinars, you basically have three ways that you can kind of grab our attention. You can just type questions into the Q&A, and there we can either type back answers or answer live. If you want to, and everybody will see the Q&A questions. If you want to, you can just use the Zoom chat, and the Zoom chat will just come to myself and Michelle. And like that, if you have any technical issues, just throughout the webinar, just let Michelle know, or you can simply raise your hand and Michelle will get back to you throughout the session. So let's go. So just very quickly, those of you who don't know, we're Krisolis. We started back in 2009, actually as the Analytics store. We rebranded earlier this year as Krisolis. And essentially in that time, we've developed kind of a very strong leaning to helping organizations through training, mentoring, consulting, helping them embed analytics into their everyday processes. In around 2012, we really started delivering a lot of training. Until then, it was mostly consultancy. In 2014, we started growing the team. We actually published books. So when people ask you, how much do you know about this? I could actually say, well, I've actually written a book on it. So in 2015, we published a book with MIT Press. The second edition is currently being proofed. And then, as I said, we rebranded in 2020 as Krisolis. Just very quickly, what, I suppose an outline of the services that we provide. We basically work with our customers to help them, in some cases, develop their analytics and AI strategies. In other cases, it's just purely skills development, where we work with them in developing and implementing skills programs, skills development programs, or sometimes we actually help them embedding analytics and AI. So this is where we use mentorship programs or consultancy to actually help them do the analytics themselves. So it's a mix of these three services that we use with all of our organizations. And the primary goal is to help them embed analytics into their processes, but also the skills required to use that analytics and AI processes effectively within their organization. So it's not just simply creating tools for them to use, it's also helping them understand how to do it themselves. And that's a really key differentiator in how we work. So what are we going to talk about today? So today we're going to talk about the idea that how you need to start thinking about developing good analytics practices within your organization, and how do you go about doing it? What are the things you need to be thinking about? So I think with all of this, and anybody who was in the session last week about analytics strategy will have heard me talk about that everything should start with your business strategy, and this is no different. So your skills kind of development and how you're going to do that within your organization should sit, and particularly your analytics skills development should sit within your analytics strategy. But you can't actually develop an analytics strategy without knowing, first of all, your business strategy. So everything starts there. And then once you start getting into your analytics strategy, for me, there's kind of three main steps that you need to go through in order to think about how you're going to plan and deliver a development program to really help your organization embed analytics across the organization. So first of all, you have to define your roles. and the skills required for each role. And not just within your analytics teams, but across the organization. And I'll talk a little bit around that, around the different roles within the organizations and the competencies required. Then you assess the gap. So once you know what the roles are and the competencies are, you see, well, where are we weak? Where do we need development? And then essentially you put in a plan to fill the gaps. So I'm going to talk through these kind of elements kind of individually over the next little while. So first of all, starting point should always be your business strategy, and this should drive your analytics and AI strategy. And I actually, when I was looking at the strategy piece last week, this is a nice piece from Forbes that I found. So this is their 7 steps, 7 keys to successful strategic planning. So this is setting up your strategy. And these are the things that they think you should be doing. So assess your industry competitors and market trends, identify your opportunities and threats with a SWOT analysis, review your organization mission and vision, set your business goals and priorities, define functional objectives and key initiatives, determine staffing, budgets and finance, and then track and measure monthly, identify and track success measures monthly and quarterly. Okay, so kind of looks at that and you're like, that makes sense. But what are the important pieces of this that feed into your analytics strategy? And for me, when I look at this, there are 3 key bits that are really, really important that you need to consider for your analytics strategy. So one of them is really understanding the business goals and priorities, because they should lead into what are the goals and priorities for your analytics strategy, and particularly for the types of projects that you're going to take on within your analytics teams. When you think about then the functional, define your functional objectives and key initiatives, particularly the key initiatives, I think are really, really important for your analytics strategy, because it's within these key initiatives that you're going to drive out what analytics activities you're going to be doing, because you want to basically provide analytic solutions within those key initiatives. And what's really important there is when you start looking at those key initiatives from a skills development point of view and thinking about training your team, is you need to think about, well, if these are our key initiatives across the organization, and these are the types of analytic solutions that we can apply to these types of initiatives, then what are the skills we need to develop those initiatives, develop those analytic solutions? And that's where you really need to, you can kind of hone in on what are the particular skills that are required within your organization. And then I said it last week, I'll say it again. You're always thinking about, tracking success. So when we think about these elements for your analytics strategy, so your business goals and priorities. So business goals must have KPIs associated with them for effective measurement. And this is really, really important. And it's those KPIs that we're going to use to drive our analytics activities. This should include goals and priorities using your AI strategy. Functional objectives and key initiatives. As I said, this is going to help you drive what are the analytics and AI solutions that you're going to develop. And then track and measure. So it comes back to those KPIs. So anything that you do should have measurable benefit, both in terms of the projects that you're running, but also in terms of your skills development initiatives. And it's really, really important when you're thinking about developing out your skills programs, skills development programs, thinking about how you're going to measure their success. So let's think about building that analytics green team. So what are the things we need to think about when we actually, so if you think about it, we've looked at our business strategy, we've looked at our analytics strategy, and we've identified within that strategy that we need to look at the skills that are required to implement our analytics and AI strategy. So it's really, really important that I think about, okay, what are the steps we need to go about in terms of developing out a plan for that skills development. So first and foremost, and this may seem obvious, and it is obvious, but it's not always straightforward. And this is that you need to define the roles and skill levels required across your organization in the area of analytics and AI. Now, this is where I come into the idea that analytics is a team sport, okay? And it's really, really important that we remember this, okay? And what I mean by a team sport, and when I talk about this, is that, you know, a lot of times, and particularly when I started working in analytics back in the early 2000s, analytics was very much seen as this function that sat over somewhere between IT and data, somewhere in a technical division, somewhere probably in a basement, and where you did techie, analytic-y, mathsy, statsy stuff, and every so often came and talked to the business and told them about things, or analysis that you've done, and then went back into your dungeon. But it's really, really important that organizations need to evolve that viewpoint. That if they're really going to embrace analytics and AI, and a lot of times people are now referring to it as digital transformation. So that idea of using data and technology and all the tools are now available with you in order to transform your business. What do you need to do in terms of defining the roles, or how does that change the roles definitions that you have within your organization and the competencies? And we at Krisolis kind of think about roles in 3 levels. So we think about having the practitioners, the decision makers, and your executive level. Okay, and essentially when we think about what the role of each of these levels is within your analytics and AI strategy, it varies. And also the competencies that are required vary. So I suppose if we start with the executives, again, it's something that I see quite a bit when I deal with companies, is that a senior executive may bring you in and go, yeah, we need to do this, we need to get on top of this digital transformation thingy, we need to be doing AI and analytics. I'm reading it everywhere, like data is the new gold, don't you know, or the new oil. Will you sort that out? And then they'll kind of send you out and expect you to go and sort it out. But they never, or they sometimes don't, or they underestimate the need for them to embrace analytics and AI in how they work. And if you think about the role of a senior executive, they've a few different roles. One of them is obviously defining strategy. So they have to start thinking about building analytics and AI into their actual strategic work. They also then need to think about their KPIs and what they want those to be, and then what are the priorities. They need to think all about that. And also they tend to control budget, so they tend to pay for things. So it's really, really important that your executives understand their role in terms of their use of analytics and AI, and that possibly there's kind of upskilling required, that it's not just good enough for them to let other people do it, that they may need to incorporate it into how they work. We then look at the decision makers, and these are the people across your organization that work in various functions, from HR to finance, to marketing, and everywhere in between. And essentially, these are the people who on a daily basis are running your business. But they're constantly making decisions all the time. And what we need to do when we start thinking about our analytics and AI strategies, start looking at those decision-making processes and see how analytics, AI, data can improve them. So it might be with your marketeers. Is there a way that we can effectively identify who are the particular targets who may respond best to a marketing campaign? If we're looking at finance, is it that they need some forecasting models to forecast what sales might be? Currently, I'm sure there's lots of finance teams trying to, crazily forecast what's the impact that COVID is going to have on their business and their financial or their cash flows, etc. So across the organization, analytics is going to be used to drive different decisions. And I suppose what's really important is for those decision makers is to understand how they can use that analytics. In most cases, they won't be developing it, but they may have to be able to incorporate it into their decision making. And then obviously there's the practitioners. And this is kind of the obvious one. It tends to be where everybody starts. These are the actual analytics practitioners who are going to be developing data analytics and AI solutions to allow you to basically embed all of this fantastic technology and insight into your business practice. But it's really important not to just focus your skills development on just those practitioners. You have to think about developing the skills across your organization to really embrace analytics. So what I'm actually going to do now is just launch a poll. So it'll be really interesting to ask people in the audience. So basically, when we look at these roles, do you consider yourself an executive, a decision maker, or a practitioner? So if you just hold on 2 seconds, I'm going to actually have to stop my screen share. So what I want you to do so hopefully you can all see the poll at the moment. So just out of interest, do you see yourself as a decision maker, a practitioner, or an executive? So I'll just leave this open for another 5 or 6 seconds. Excellent. So I'm going to end polling now. And essentially we can see here, so about 71% of our audience, so we're mainly made of practitioners, and then we have about 30% decision makers as well. We've no executives on today's webinar. They're obviously but that's fine. So I'm going to just go back to the slide deck now. So it is just important when you're thinking about your role, think about how you need to develop your role. And sometimes, particularly if you're an analytics practitioner, sometimes you may have to encourage some of the other kind of stakeholders across the business. So they may be decision makers, they may be executives in particular projects or particular initiatives that you're trying to run. There may be upskilling that's required there, and we might talk a little bit about some of the things that you might be able to do to enable that upskilling across those types of roles. So back to screen share. So at this point, I'm just going to interject and make sure there's no questions. So I don't think there's any, so we'll keep going. So when we think about the competencies that are required across the different levels, so for your executive level competencies, I suppose what's really important is 2 things: that they understand the art of what's possible. A lot of the time, executive teams will make decisions around strategy and budget. And if they don't know what's possible in terms of analytics and AI, sometimes they just don't factor it in those conversations. So sometimes it's about educating them, and these are all the things that you should be considering doing in this area. These are the types of initiatives that as an organization you need to be running, and these are the types of things. So it might be, you know, if you are, you know, trying to enhance sales within your organization, you know, do you have a good CRM system? And it may be that you've lots of good analysis and analytics going on in the background, but you don't have the system to implement some of those, you know, in a sales and marketing perspective. So it may be that you need to make that investment in a CRM system. And it's at, you know, the executive level that they're going to make decisions about that sort of investment, and particularly those big investments. So therefore, they need to understand a little bit around why would they want to invest in it. So what's possible? What are the gains? And sometimes they can be the people who can, read something and be, kind of start things off. But if they don't know, have a basic understanding of what's possible in this area, sometimes they tend to shy away from it. And then it never really tends to become a strategic view of the organization as something that needs to be addressed. And the other thing they need to do is take some of the outputs from some of the analytics and AI activity and embed that sometimes into their strategy and way of thinking. And that can be anything from as simple as having like an executive dashboard, a very clearly presented information that, your executives are seeing on a daily basis that's updated, to how they might embed and think about their organization across maybe, you have, certain segments that are defined. There's lots of things that they can take from the analytics output and embed it into how they make decisions. And it's really, really important that that's enabled. And sometimes they may need a little bit of help along the way in that. When you think about your decision makers and you think about the competencies that they need, a lot of it tends to factor around understanding how they can use the analytical output. So they don't necessarily need to understand in depth how it gets created or the technologies, but they do need to know how they're going to use it and how they're going to use it to enhance their decision process. And that's really, really important. And then depending on their role, there may be sometimes as part of embracing, kind of analytics, it may be that you introduce new tools. So it may be something like a new dashboarding tool or reporting tool that you're starting to use. And your decision makers may need to be skilled and upskilled in the use of those tools. So sometimes there is, I suppose, a technical element that your decision makers need to get on board. But there's a lot around kind of understanding that's required. And then when we get into our practitioners, this is where I suppose it does get a little bit more detailed. So the first thing you have to think about, and these are the individuals and teams that will be designing, creating data analytics and AI solutions across your organization. And what you need to think about, we talked a little bit last week about, where you might place these teams and different things, but now we want to think about what are the specific roles and how are you going to develop the skills within those roles. So the first thing you have to do here is you actually have to define the roles. Now that sounds relatively easy, like, well, surely we just know what they are. Now these are some suggested roles that I have. Now I'm not kind of wedded to them. And I think depending on the organization, these roles may change. But you are going to need some flavor of these roles in any analytics team. So first of all, you need your data scientist. Okay, well, we're going to refer to them as data scientists. Some people might call them your analytics specialist or your AI specialist. But essentially, these are the people who have advanced skills in analytics and AI, and they're the people who are building, designing, developing analytics and AI solutions, using things like predictive analytics, unsupervised learning techniques, machine learning, all of those terms that you can think of. These are the guys who are using all of that fancy stuff, and really delivering what should be quite sophisticated solutions into the business in that area. With all of this, and all of your analytics is going to be underpinned by data, the use of data, and it's really, really important that in some context you have some sort of data engineer or architect. And they're the, role or person who controls, manages, and maintains the data supply to the analytics team. It's a really, really, really important role. You then have your data analyst, or what we call your data analyst, or some people might call this an analytics analyst. And essentially, they tend to work in the area of answering kind of quick business questions. So they tend to design reports, design dashboards, do exploratory analysis. It tends to be relatively quick turnaround of analysis and insights into the business. And then you have what I call the analytics integrators. This is the person in the team, maybe the team manager, who basically works with the rest of the organization and your decision makers and your executives in order to communicate what's required from your decision makers and your executives and understand what's required within the organization and bring it back to the analytics team to help them devise what projects and solutions they're going to work on, but also then when something's developed, maybe communicate it back to the business. So these are suggested roles. Now, why I say suggested is that if you use the term data scientist and you go to 3 or 4 different organizations, they may have very different definitions of what that role encompasses, what skills that role requires. And just to highlight this point, over the last couple of days, I went onto myjobs.ie and I looked at various job descriptions and I tried to match the job description with the type of role. So if we think of data scientist, data engineer, and data analyst, we take those 3 roles. And here we're gonna play a game. We're gonna play guess the role. So I'm gonna put up a poll in a second, but before I do, I'm just gonna describe. So this was an ad that's created on myjobs.ie. So essentially the primary responsibilities for this role is to interpret data, analyze results using statistical techniques and provide ongoing reports, develop and implement data sets, data collection system, data analytics, acquire data from primary and secondary data sources, identify and analyze and interpret trends and patterns, filter and clean data, reviewing computer reports, printouts, and performance indicators, work with management to prioritize business and information needs, locate and define new processes, improvements and opportunities, find and implement data acquisition and integration logic, selecting appropriate combinations of methods and tools, find technology stack to inform optimal scalability and performance of the solution, and evaluate organizational methods and provide source to target mappings and information model specification documents for data sets. Right, so that's the role that they described. Now, what I want you to do, stop sharing, is tell me all right, now, excuse me, my polls doesn't want to work. So, apologies. So for that first role, so question 1 here is, what role is this ad describing? So just for the first one, is it a data scientist, a data engineer, a data analyst? So for that role that I just described, what is it? So I'll give you another 10 seconds or so to tell me what you think. So I'm going to end polling now. And so across the board, so we have some people who think it's a data scientist, some people who think it's a data engineer, and then some people who think that it's a data analyst. Okay, so nobody's clear. Okay, and if we actually go back to actually advertised as a data analyst. Now, I personally, like, when I think of a data analyst, I think there's a lot in here I would probably have thought data scientist, but it just goes to show you. And just there's a second one of these. So here, I'm going to guess the role. So this ad is looking for somebody who's going to work with a cross-functional team of scientists, engineers, and IT to develop data pipelines for analytics applications, understand the needs of the business, and understand areas where analytics can add continuous value, use available data infrastructure to identify features of interest for critical product responses, identify and process solutions for gaps in the current data infrastructure where appropriate, support and develop of new and existing pharmaceutical products through analytics, so obviously for a pharmaceutical company, work with IT applications to identify, test, and implement new technologies in the production environment, present ideas and final findings to internal and external partners, and adhere to all company and departmental policies. So I'm just going to, in this row, I'm just going to relaunch this. So in this example, what do we think we have? So were the people in this role, and people advertising this role, were they looking for a data scientist, a data engineer, or a data analyst? So a couple of answers in there. So I'll give you another 5 or 6 seconds. Think about it. Okay, so we'll end polling there. And essentially, again, we have a mix here between data engineer and data analyst. What was interesting is, and these were just, when I went into Irish Jobs, sorry, that was actually a data scientist, and nobody in my poll chose data scientist. And what I just wanted to do this to show you that it's really important within your organization that when you start defining roles and giving them titles, that you're really clear within your organization as to what a particular role is. Okay. And what are the particular skills and roles and responsibilities within a particular role? Because these terms like data scientist, data engineer, data analyst, they get merged kind of all the time, which actually can make it actually makes this really, really difficult. Okay. So you may, apply for a role in one company for a data scientist, and then for another company for a very similar role, it seems like a similar role, and you would call it a data analyst. So I just think in terms of when you think about defining the skills and competencies within your roles, particularly within your practitioner space, to really think about getting the skills and competencies right, and then giving it the title. So I almost think about, right, what does the role encompass? What do you need a particular person or team of people to do? And I suppose when I think about all of these roles, they all have some sort of mix between data management skills and solution design and embedding those solutions into the business, and then analysis, analytics, and AI skills. So when you think about the mix of skills and the skills that you're going to have to develop, it's in these areas. Now, I would say, but again, this may vary within your organization. So let's say a data engineer would be very heavily embedded in the data management skills. There you're looking at databases, data structures, possibly getting into data governance, those sort of areas. They possibly will have to do some analysis, maybe some basic reporting, kind of be able to understand what the data scientists need from the data in order to be able to support them. But really their skill is heavily involved in the data management with a little bit of analytics, analysis, analytics, and AI skills. And then they'll be embedding the data solutions. So thinking about making the data available both to the analytics teams, but also sometimes wider across the business. And for me, the data scientist is just your advanced analytics practitioner. It's the person actually building your models, doing your analysis. And really, their main skill is analysis, analytics, and AI. It's really, really thinking about, in very heavily dependent on those skills, thinking about then developing solutions in that space and embedding them within the organization. And then they would have some data management skills, but probably not as advanced as your data engineer. So I would see myself sitting in that kind of role when I go on project work. And I tend to, like, I can write SQL, I can, query a database, I can do joins. Can I build production level ETL? Not near, no, I can't. I don't have that skill. And I would say a data engineer uses that skill. And then again, your analytics analyst or your data analyst role is kind of more ad hoc exploratory analysis. And again, these roles may sit within a specific analytics team, or they may actually be dispersed across the organization, depending on how you set up that analytics function. Again, we talked a little bit about that last week. So whether you have a hub and spoke model, whether you have a distributed model, whether it's just chaos and you've got these skills scattered everywhere, you can call that the decentralized option. So you really need to think about, and in this I would say, define the skills required for a particular role, and then think about the title that's most appropriate within your organization. And then you also have to think about different titles to make sure that there isn't too much overlap. Sometimes, you may have to sit down and think, work with HR around this. But really, really important that you get it correct for your organization. And that can be challenges when people have kind of preconceived ideas of what a particular role is. One thing that we use to do this with some of our client organizations is that we actually develop out a skills matrix. And we look at particular roles within the organization. We think, like, for this role, what skills do they need across the different categories? So in analytics and AI, basically we look at data, we look at analytics, we look at their technical skills, their business knowledge, and then communication, delivery, and people management. And depending on the role, we think about, well, what is the level of skill required for a particular role in any of these areas? And basically we use this as a starting point. And this can also help us kind of differentiate. So again, that, data engineer, you would need a very high skill level in your data integration, data management, and governance. At the mid-level in your analytics skills, you'd probably need very high technical skills, but it would be technical skills in particular data tools, most likely, some business knowledge and some communication skills. Whereas if you look at your data scientist or your advanced analytics practitioner, they're going to need a very high skill level in your analytics with a moderate skill level in your data integration, data management, and governance. So it kind of flips. So this can help you, just, having, a structure like this can help you just within your own organization really think about defining roles and the skills required within those roles, and also then, being able to compare them. And the other thing that you can do here is, for instance, you can, look at the particular tools that you're using. So in here, your reporting tool that maybe you're using, Power BI or Tableau or Excel. In terms of programming, whether you're using some sort of analytical programming tool like Python or SAS, whether you SQL, you may also, kind of some of the programming, you may go into some of the more kind of big data programming requirements. So you basically make this, first of all, you kind of match the skills to the skills required within your organization. And then you look at, for specific roles, what skills are required and to what level. So once you identify the roles, and it's really important to think about that broadly, think about it across the whole organization, not just within your analytics functions. When you identify the roles, and you identify the skills required. And I really, really recommend using some sort of skills matrix. Then essentially you just have to assess the gaps. So you have to go, right, these are the roles that we want. Okay. Where are we? So if we're going to, implement our analytics strategy, implement analytics and AI within our organization, what are the skills that we require? So we define those, and then where are we and where's the gap? And essentially, you need to assess the gap. And there's lots of different ways, and we do this in kind of different ways. But essentially, you have to look at it, and you can think about it at a department level, at a team level, or an individual level. So you can look at the skills gaps in different ways. But essentially, you need to assess where those gaps are, and you can do that using surveys and assessments. So you can actually just survey people and ask them to describe their skill level in different areas. You may test them. You may put out little kind of multiple choice type tests. You can do interviews with employees. You can sit down and talk to them about their role, talk to them about what their skills and competencies are. You can get feedback from performance reviews. So if you have a very rigorous performance structure that you can trust the data and trust the feedback in it, that might be useful. Or there is actual software that allows you to do this. But essentially what you want to do is look at the current skill level and assess, right, where are we across the organization in terms of our skill levels in the area of analytics, AI and data, and then document the gaps. So then compare it to the roles. Well, these are the roles and these are skill levels we require. And then go, right, this is where we're missing skills. And once you have those gaps identified, and you have them identified across, the various teams and within the different roles across your organization, then you basically work to build a program to close the gap. So you design a skills development program to fill the gaps. And essentially, when we're working with organizations here, what you need to think about, so when developing skills development programs, first of all, it's a lot of fun and it's really interesting. But I think really think about all of the tools at your disposal. So don't just think about formal classroom training. Okay, very valuable, really useful, has its place. And you can think about formal classroom training, be it online or face-to-face. But think about, sometimes we do quite a lot of facilitated workshops. So particularly where you're trying to get business teams and analytics teams to work more together, sometimes workshops work really well there. They work really well at an executive level, workshops, more so than training, helping them kind of understand and explore ideas, and sometimes labeling it as a strategy workshop as opposed to analytics training can sometimes get it over the line a little bit more with your exec level. Thinking about mentoring. So rather sometimes than actual formal training, and it's something that we're doing more and more of now, is our team will work alongside somebody who's trying to maybe build a particular model or embed analytics in a particular way, and they're just not too sure. They haven't done it before for some reason. It's a new technique or it's a new technology. Well, we kind of work alongside them in kind of a mentoring capacity. And this can be done using external mentors or what I call peer-to-peer learning. You can use internal mentors, but I think doing it in a formal structure can be really useful. Having things like datathon, hackathon type style events, Fix-It Fridays. So maybe peer-to-peer learning. So this is where people learn from, people in the organization. And then setting up an analytics user group within your organization. So there's lots of ways, there's lots of different tools that you can use in order to implement your skills development strategy. But no matter which of these you're using, there's one thing that I think is really, really important. A lot of times when we focus on developing skills and those within analytics teams, we focus on the technical skills and the very theoretical skills. Don't forget about your soft skills. Don't forget about communication. Don't forget about project management. All of those skills are really, really important, but think of them in an analytics context. Really, really important. And then the last thing in terms of developing, kind of skills development engagements and engagements and programs is to really think about getting the right mix. So it's getting the right mix of theory, tools, technologies, and applications. So thinking about what is it that somebody needs to learn and putting in the program that enables that. And it might be a mix of some of the things that I've shown. It might be some classroom training mixed with some mentoring, and then using peer-to-peer beyond that. It might be, it might be a project that has to be done and it has to be on project mentoring. That's the only way it can be done because there's real pressure in the team to get something delivered. So really think about what is the right mix of kind of training needs. So mix of theory, tools training, and applying it to a particular business domain, thinking about best practice. So developing out your skills development programs, developing out the different initiatives that you're going to run, be they, very structured training or kind of less structured, but think about how are you going to embed your different skills within your organization using everything that's at your disposal, and really getting that mix right. And try, I think, to veer away from just pure classroom training and thinking about the program. So thinking about kind of long term. So somebody learning a skill and then embedding that skill. So doing a project, doing a sample project, using it in the business, and think about the communication skill, presenting the information back to the business. Think about all of those things that somebody needs to learn and setting up programs that enables that. Really, really important. So I suppose my session takeaways, and then we'll go to Q&A. So if you do have any questions, I know we're running a little bit over time. So if you do have any questions, do be typing them into the chat or the question and answer section. So the second takeaway, so analytics is a team sport. And don't just limit your skills development to your more technical teams. Really think about skills development across those different roles. So your practitioners, your executives, and your decision makers. Really, really important. Starting point is always your business strategy. Your analytics strategy should match and be part of your business strategy, and then your skills development. So building up those skills within your organization has to be part of that analytics strategy. So then think about defining your roles, and as you can see from just that little test, guess the role. That's that can be tricky, and so spend some time and get it right, possibly using something like a skills matrix. Assess the gaps, and then just develop out a program that will fill those gaps for you. And then use the right mix of training options to create a holistic program. And be imaginative here. This is where I think for long-term engagement in a skills development program, just classroom after classroom engagement can be tough. So think about all the other things that you can do across your organization in order basically to make you an amazing analytics and digitally enabled organization. So